supply chain impact of Volkswagen going green. My guest today is Simon Croom. He is professor of supply chain management at the University of San Diego School of Business. Hello, Simon. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks. And how are you, Robert?
Excellent. Thank you very much for being with me. So, fill me in, please. First of all, just what is Volkswagen doing? I understand it's buying green car credits from Tesla. What's that all about?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on the carbon credits myself, but in order to try and become a net zero organization and meet the impending regulations for auto manufacturers, all of the manufacturers have got to demonstrate that they're meeting regulatory requirements for their carbon output. And one way of doing that is to offset. It's analogous to us buying trees when we fly. And Tesla have a surplus, and Tesla have been trading the credits for some time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, wouldn't it be easier or more logical? As I understand it, most major car makers are going toward electric vehicles anyway, and some of them with a very short time frame. Why not just go in that direction instead of bother to buy these green credits?
Well, I guess it's the process of looking at your total life cycle impact of your vehicle, not just the batteries, and but also the construction of the vehicles, the construction of components, and the extraction all the way back up to the mines. So thinking about where can you make the most impact. Personally, I think Volkswagen are being conservative. They're trying to be risk averse, and this helps them to meet the targets that they've set themselves. And as you rightly say, all of the manufacturers are going for electric vehicles, but that doesn't necessarily immediately equate to a lower carbon footprint.
Takes a long time to build that supply chain and build the capability, get the batteries and all that kind of stuff. So why not in the meantime maybe do this?
Yeah,
Thinking is
indeed.
that.
And if you go back to the start of the debate about hybrid and EVs, there was quite a lot of analysis that showed you really needed a particular life in terms of mileage of a vehicle before it was actually environmentally beneficial. If you were looking at 100,000 miles on a Toyota Prius, for example, that was found not to be as environmentally friendly as a Hummer.
Now, why? I don't understand. Why is that the case?
Because of the environmental footprint of creating the battery packs,
I
which
see.
is far more invasive than the internal combustion engine. Also, the source of electricity that's being used. I mean, in the end, you're really trying to take an average environmental impact, because we don't know how the user's going to use the vehicle. Where are they going to get their electricity from? Is it green electricity? Is it fossil fuel electricity? Is it wind, renewable, etc.? How long will the battery last? And how were the materials processed all the way upstream in the supply chain? So you kind of take an average of what your expectations are.
Yeah, and the batteries themselves, as I understand it, incorporate a certain amount of rare earth materials that are themselves environmentally disadvantageous in order to access and mine. So that's also a consideration.
Yeah, and you think about the extraction of lithium. It's mining isn't just digging a hole in the ground and pulling stuff out. It's about polluting the immediate environment. It's a lot of water usage. So the water footprint is a significant issue, which, to be frank, really needs to be addressed. But we focus a lot more on greenhouse gases than we do on water footprint.
Yeah. Now, another aspect of VW's recent actions, there's a joint venture in China that they're undertaking in order to meet local environmental rules. Explain what's going on there.
Well, if you're an auto manufacturer in China, you have to have a joint venture. It's been a requirement. For example, Hyundai have a factory in Beijing, which is actually the Hyundai Beijing Motor Corporation. Interesting how the joint ventures operate. It's about maintaining local content. It's about maintaining local control, and it's also about stimulating local economy. So it's not unusual. I just think China are very forthright in how they manage that, because of the kind of government controls that you have there.
But China has been a disaster in terms of carbon emissions with its recent industrial projects and the like. And so I'm wondering, is China also going to be enforcing some strict environmental rules that automakers need to adhere to going forward?
We'd be led to believe so. If you think about the recent well, recent, I'm talking about the last 2 years, the Chinese government have certainly stated that their focus on environmental impact is something they're really putting at the forefront of their economic policy, not just energy and fossil fuels, although they, as you rightly say, they're one of the major producers in the world of greenhouse gases. Per capita, they're second in the world after the United States. But also in terms of thinking about how you can create new industries. So the renewable and green industries are a massive opportunity. And we've seen, particularly with President Biden's recent claims, and in Europe, the claims of moving forward the zero net impact policy to try and reduce greenhouse gases. That's a significant catalyst.
It does seem like all the major automakers, or at least most of them, have announced some sort of plan to produce nothing but electric vehicles by a certain date, in some cases 2030, maybe beyond that. So that is the general trend in the automotive industry anyway, is it not?
Yeah, the writing's on the wall. And, this is an illustration of, when we think about environmental policy, we tend to get hung up a lot on what a national government's doing, what's the US doing, what's the EU doing, what's Britain doing, etc., China. But when you think about what supply chains are doing, Volkswagen are a global business, so are Ford. These guys are taking decisions which are going to have a profound impact on the choice we have as consumers about the vehicles we can buy, how we use those vehicles, the infrastructure that goes alongside, and the massive investment that this is stimulating as well. And essentially, for every dollar you spend on an electric vehicle, you've created $7 worth of economic activity on the global supply chain.
Given that massive investment, however, I'm wondering what has been the response to Volkswagen's recent moves by first of all, investors themselves. How has this affected Volkswagen's stock price, if at all?
Oh, you caught me out there. I haven't looked at Volkswagen's stock price at all.
But do you get a sense that investors are willing to let Volkswagen put out the kind of money up front that's going to be required to create this infrastructure for electric and green vehicles?
Well, there's certainly a recognition that organizations that are more sustainable and meet environmental and social governance, ESG criteria, tend to perform better in the stock market in terms of attracting investors. We also know that they tend to attract consumers far more effectively. And the research that myself and colleagues have carried out show that not only do companies tend to perform better financially, that includes investment capital as well as profit in the marketplace, they perform better operationally, which is kind of an interesting issue, because what you see is that organizations that really put an emphasis on environmental and social responsibility and social justice in their supply chains tend to outperform in things like quality, performance, productivity, speed, clear, tangible metrics that are about how you build your vehicle, how you make your product.
Well, what about customer acceptance? Do you believe that the general consuming audience these days is open to the idea of electric vehicles, and this is something that would boost sales of any car company that's going in that direction?
I think there's going to be no option. The range anxiety is an issue, particularly in the United States because of geography, less so in the European Union because of geography. The average distance traveled per trip is, I think, 3 times larger in the US than in the EU, just because, I think there's definitely acceptance by consumers. There's also anxiety, but, consumers don't always have discretion. We like to think we make choice, but we make constrained choices. I go to I look at the dealership and, they don't offer me a V12 700 brake horsepower vehicle for $30,000. So I can't buy that. I'd buy, a hybrid vehicle instead. So,
Mhm.
we're being led into
Well,
this.
it's a long tradition in the auto industry, isn't it? Going back to Henry Ford saying you can have any color you want as long as it's
Yeah,
black.
yeah, yeah,
So maybe we have a
absolutely.
few more choices than that today. But again, just finally, I just want to understand this has got to also cause some supply chain challenges for companies that are going electric, does it not? Especially in light of the
Mm.
current semiconductor shortage and what I had
Oh,
mentioned
yeah.
before about rare earth materials, which so many of which are sourced from China. What are some of the big challenges you see that have to be overcome on the supply chain side in order to make a smooth transition?
Supply chains compete with supply chains. And so we often think that Ford compete with General Motors, compete with Fiat Chrysler, etc. But from a supply chain perspective, they're competing with Apple, they're competing with Dell, they're competing with electronics manufacturers, because all of these guys are looking for similar components, similar batteries. You've also got the new sectors opening up, which have never traditionally been involved with vehicles. So when you need to charge your car, you're using pretty heavy duty electrical components in your house. You need an infrastructure. You also need to think about how those cars are integrating. I mean, one of the things that Volkswagen and others are doing is thinking about, well, our vehicles are part of the electric grid and they're a storage system. And one of the problems
Right.
is storage. So maybe this is you start to move from, a motor corporation to a mobility corporation, just like Toyota have done. They now define themselves as a mobility, not a motor
Mm,
corporation.
yeah. And as you point out, they have no choice. We have to go in this direction. Professor
Yeah,
Simon Croom, University of San Diego, thank you very much for sharing your time with me today to talk about this very important subject. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
you're welcome.